Hello, hello everyone! Welcome to another day of drawing. I hope you all had a wonderful day so far. I know I have. So, today I thought we would start off with the same exercise that we learned yesterday. Which is the rough perspective. Here's a link in the chat. If you need to look at the steps, get reminded. So yeah, we'll just do 15 minutes of this before going on to the new exercise. So I'll set a timer for 15 minutes, and then we do this exercise. Alright, that was 15 minutes of rough perspective. We will now hop over to the new exercise. Rotated boxes. Ooh. Oh geez, we need to animate on paper? Oh man. This is gonna Alright, cool. Well, let's just hop right into it.
Now, before we start on this exercise, which is called the rotated boxes exercise, I am going to give you a little bit of a caveat. This exercise is really hard. This one and the one after it, the organic perspective boxes exercise, were included here not with the intention of having you kind of do it perfectly and then move on. It's really difficult. The point of it is to get students to start thinking about 3D space in a different way. It challenges you to work without plotting your perspective back, without thinking about where your vanishing points are explicitly. And it forces you to work more organically and look at neighboring forms and try and infer what the kind of perspective of this space is. On top of that, it kind of teaches you that it's okay to fail. Failure is a very important part of the learning process. If you are just expecting to have success in every area, and if you cannot handle defeat and failure, you are not going to make it very far, because failure is really what teaches us the most. So if and when you mess up on this exercise, don't worry about it. All you should be striving to do is follow the instructions as closely as possible. Don't skip steps. Don't like glaze over the text written in the lesson page. Just focus on following it step by step. And if you have trouble, if you mess up, that's fine. So this exercise involves creating a sort of network of, it's sort of boxes. They're not exactly boxes because technically we wouldn't be able to do this with proper boxes, but I'll show you what I mean in a second. So we start off this exercise by creating a cross, just our axes in the center. And we start off with a simple box. Now this box is not like the boxes that we usually deal with, which are like cuboid. They have right angles all over. This box is going to be a little bit tapered. Now you can't actually tell that it's tapered, not from this, but based on how all our other boxes will be arranged, it will essentially be impossible for it not to be tapered. By tapered, I mean if you were looking at it from the top, it kind of converges like this instead of being straight. So we have a box, standard 1-point perspective, just plotted in there. And remember, this is freehand. You can use a ruler for the axes. But not for your boxes. And basically what we want to do is we want to create a rotation. We want to draw in a bunch of, I'll just put this in real quickly. We want to close them in so that we get this whole range of rotation in all directions. kind of like this. So that's basically the idea. We can end up filling in our corners as well, and a lot of people get kind of scared and overwhelmed by this. So that's what we're going to be aiming for. But to achieve this, we want to start out by thinking about what our range of rotation is going to be. So right now we have the center, but we don't know what the extremities are going to be. And the reason that I want to kind of define this right now is that people have a tendency of trying to do a full 180-degree rotation of boxes, and they'll only end up doing like 40 or 50 degrees worth. But if we actually draw in what we're kind of rotating towards, which are just more boxes that are rotated like 90 degrees from this one, so we're just looking at their side faces. This gives us a sort of visual cue as to how far we need to rotate. Just helps us think about what we're doing a little bit more. Now you'll notice that I'm not actually drawing through these boxes because they're only supposed to exist as kind of guides. So we just want to have them sitting there as though we're looking at this the side face of these boxes. Now the real work comes in when we start drawing in our next box. So I am estimating. Based on what I know about 3D space, I am not going to be placing or plotting back towards a specific vanishing point. I do know, though, that I am not drawing towards this vanishing point. As a box rotates, which I actually show in the lesson, there's a little animated diagram, the vanishing point slides along the horizon. So if this vanishing point were here, it would move ever so slightly in this direction as the box rotated to be in this state. So if I was actually plotting it back, it would be, I don't know, somewhere like this maybe. Something like that. But the point of this exercise is not to actually plot them back like that. The point is to estimate it organically, knowing what we know about boxes in 3D space. And we do want to make sure that we draw through all of our boxes and the beauty of this exercise is that we've got so many boxes lined up so closely together that we can actually use these edges, neighboring edges, as hints for what the neighboring line is going to be, what it's going to look like. Because these lines are so close together that their convergence towards whatever vanishing point, in this case they're just going straight up and down, but even if they weren't, which you'll see later, their convergence doesn't need to be any visibly different. So we can use that as a sort of hint as we're building these. So you see this, this pairing here. These two lines can be essentially parallel to one another as we're drawing them. And it limits the amount of guesswork that we have to do. But the only way that you can actually take advantage of that is by keeping the gaps between your boxes narrow. Because if they're too far apart, then the trick doesn't work. So this box, as I was mentioning before with the tapering, this box cannot actually be perfectly like cuboid. It needs to be tapering somewhat, but we don't really need to think about that very much. Next we put in our following box, which we want to kind of push its rotation further. So this line that I'm drawing here is a bit of a guess. So we do have to rely on some kind of educated guesswork, which is what makes this exercise so difficult. Because at this stage, at lesson 1, I don't expect students to have developed a kind of comprehensive understanding of 3D space. That comes with time, that comes with practice, that comes with doing exercises like this. So you're not necessarily going to be able to hammer it out so easily right off the bat. Also, notice how the extremities are way out to the side. That's perfectly fine. Like I said before, they're just guides. They're there to remind you that we want to cover this full range of rotation. Now, I'm only going to be doing one quadrant of this exercise because otherwise it'll be too time consuming to do on video. But it should give you the gist of the whole thing. Here I'm going to
Jeez, just use a brush
now
that
this
isn't
one has to be
tapered.
guess again. So as the box rotates further away, the convergence of its lines gets more dramatic, so they converge much faster, and also the visible width of this plane, or this plane, will compress. Drawing through your boxes in this exercise is extremely important and helpful because it kind of teaches you how the box itself sits in 3D space, because you get a full understanding of where all the lines and all the faces are. Whereas if you were just drawing like the faces that you could see and the edges that you could see, you'd only understand it insofar as it exists and sits on the page. So we want to know how it sits in 3D space, and then we want to kind of get our heads around how that changes as the box itself rotates. So now I want to draw this corner here. Now I'm going to use the fact that I can use these lines here as hints by keeping my gaps nice and narrow. And same here. Then same here. It does get very visually confusing at times because there's just so many lines floating around. That's the downside to drawing through your boxes, but it's well worth it. Now we've got a couple of lines that are definite guesses. We do know that as these boxes kind of rotate away, the convergence of those lines compresses and it gets more dramatic. So where this one would be less dramatic, this one is going to be more dramatic. And same with this one here. And that's kind of an educated guess at this point, based on what I know about 3D space. Same here. And that's basically the gist of doing one quadrant. So, I mean, since it's very visually confusing, adding line weight and stuff like that can help considerably. Usually I kind of add a bit of cross-hatching to clarify which face is which. It's not necessary, but it does kind of help, and I don't know. People usually tend to feel more proud of their work once they've done this. But don't focus on doing it. Instead, you want to put all your effort towards following the instructions, making sure your gaps are narrow and consistent, and kind of leveraging what you do know thus far about 3D space. And so yeah, that's one quadrant. All the other quadrants follow the exact same steps. So I also have a pretty detailed breakdown of how to approach this exercise on the website itself in the lesson, in the exercise description. So follow that as you're working through it. Just make sure you're drawing through your boxes. Which again means drawing every single line that makes up the box, including the ones on the far side that you can't see. And yeah, keep your gaps narrow. And so on. And just try not to get overwhelmed. If you find yourself getting confused and like just that it's too much, take a break. Don't push through when and guess when there's no need to. And of course, last of all, remember that it's meant to be difficult. So try it once, and chances are that the best next step after this is to tackle the 250 box challenge. Which is, again, on the website. Again, when you're doing that, draw through your boxes again. Also, there's some correction methodology there that's pretty useful to use, where you extend your line back towards the implied vanishing point. After you've drawn a box, or after you've drawn a bunch of boxes, you've got these. So let's say you've drawn a box here. Boop. So let's say you've drawn this box for the challenge, then you can actually extend the lines back similarly to the rough perspective approach, but it's a little bit more comprehensive, where you know all of these red lines need to be parallel, meaning that they should be converging towards the same vanishing point, but obviously they don't. They converge here, 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 and here, which means that it's technically incorrect. So they should actually be all more coming towards an average point. But that shows you where you're going wrong and where things are incorrect. And you do it for all three sets of parallel lines. But again, I go through this explanation on the box challenge page, so be sure to apply it. This one is actually somewhat better. They're closer together. That's the main thing about estimating perspective in this way, that you're not... no one's expecting you to do it perfectly. They're expecting you to be within a certain margin of error. And after a certain point, errors become obvious to the naked eye. And if they're obvious to your viewer, then that's obviously a problem. But it's still going to be a problem within a certain kind of margin, even if people can't tell. Yeah, so that should be it for this exercise. And I hope you guys don't go too crazy over it.
Super cool. Alright. So of course you're gonna remember every single word he just said and be able to recite it back from memory. That's what's expected. Joking. So it seems like Skilla is the only one reading this one. I'd like to give it a shot myself today. Try and see if I can read through it. Let me just slip into my narration voice. This is going to be the first major exposure to something I do sometimes with my lessons exercises. Assigning tasks that are not necessarily going to be within your current ability to complete. To put it simply, these are probably going to be too hard for you, but that doesn't matter. You should still do them. All I ask is that you complete the exercise, not perfectly, not even well. Just finish it to the best of your current ability, and I ask nothing more of that. So you're supposed to fail pretty much. That's part of the exercise. So we're going to start off by drawing a vertical and horizontal axis. If you read the extra notes on horizon, eye-line, and horizontal object axis, you'll know that these lines are where 2 of our 3 vanishing points are going to sit. You can draw these axes with a ruler or a straight edge, but all the boxes will be drawn freehand with the ghosting method. Alright, so we start out with the big flat cross, and then we're going to add a single square into it, or cube. To start with, we're going to draw a box in the middle. It'll be a square, but I want you to go ahead and draw through it, adding the lines that can't generally be seen without X-ray vision. We'll be doing that for all our boxes in this exercise, because it helps us to better understand how they sit in 3D space, and how that changes as they are rotated. Ooh, that looks a bit complicated. Next, to provide us with some sort of visual reference as to the full range of rotation, we want to fill. Go ahead and place similar squares on the far ends of each axis. These are just going to serve as a reminder, but they represent boxes that have been rotated a full 90 degrees relative to the center. In all likelihood, you may end up placing these too far out. Don't worry about it. You don't need the boxes to line up to these. They're just there to remind your brain that you're trying to cover a full 180 degree for each axis. Our brains actually don't like it when we rotate objects. They prefer things to stick to a nice, clean grid. So as soon as something is turned, it starts to panic. As such, you'll often find yourself being tricked into thinking you've rotated a box more than you actually have, resulting in you covering a much smaller range of rotation at the end. These stand-ins at each side help combat this by being a constant reminder of what you're trying to achieve. Alright, so, yes, they're visual aids. You just play. Alright, so that's just to combat the fear that arises within you as you're drawing. Now, let's take a break and talk about the rotation of a box. In this animated diagram, you can see that as this box is turned on its vertical axis, its 2 horizontal vanishing points slide along the horizon line. The distance between the vanishing points stay the same, they're just skittering along. As it rotates, the convergence towards one vanishing point becomes more gradual, with the vanishing point moving further and further from the box, eventually going to infinity. The other VP comes closer and closer, however, and its convergence is getting more rapid. Yes. So yeah, so that kind of makes sense that as you're rotating, of course your vanishing points are going to move as well. I'm not sure if they're, because, alright, yeah, I got you. Now we're going to start rotating them. These boxes are not cubes, they taper with the back faces being smaller than their front. Alright. Now, let's draw our first rotated box. Following the principle demonstrated in the animated diagram above, the vanishing points slide across the horizon. And as the convergence of one set of lines becomes more gradual and the other becomes more dramatic. Something worth noting, they're not actually cubes. In order for this exercise to work, and for all the boxes to stay nice and tightly packed together, we're actually going to be using boxes that are not perfectly rectangular or cuboid. Meaning the far end of our boxes are going to be smaller than the closer end, so they taper in one dimension. It's actually not that important to keep this in mind, but it's a point that has confused some of those who've thought a bit too hard about the particular aspects of the distracted themselves with it. So yes, the boxes are tapered, they're not cubes. As you add more boxes to fill your axis, note that I specifically want you to draw 2 on either side of the center one. No more than that, no less. So as you add more boxes to fill out your axis, keep your boxes packed together with narrow, consistent gaps between them. They will overlap one another, and that's fine. I also want you to continue drawing through them as you have been doing thus far. As the box turns and the vanishing points slide, one side becomes smaller and while the other grows. Don't be afraid to overlap your boxes. Well, this looks really cool. Looks like something from a cyberpunk. For the vertical rotation, vanishing points slide up and down. Do the same thing for the vertical axis. It's no different from the horizontal one, especially since you'll be rotating your page around plenty. In the use of the ghosting method. So up, down, side to side really loses meaning. Now, the corners. This is where a trick that you hopefully have already been taken advantage of comes into play. The fact that we've been keeping our boxes close together is critical because it allows us to use the neighboring edges as hints when adding new lines. Notice how, in this example, I've color-coded sets of lines shared by each different box that are very close to running parallel to one another. This is very useful information. As you can construct forms and objects, you can often find information present in their surroundings, especially the things physically closest to them. This can allow you to infer how certain lines should behave without having to think about far-off vanishing points. Yeah, so some of the boxes, some of the lines here, that's the thing he also explained in the video. Converging towards some up point here, using neighboring edges to figure out the angle of your new box's edge. Notice how he can't see the face of the far box, the front face. Keeping this up, fill in the rest of the boxes. The corners are the most difficult, especially as you get around all the boxes. Especially as you get all the way out to the extreme corners. All the same, I want you to complete this exercise even if attempting the hard parts is going to muck up the whole page. That's completely fine. We're not drawing something for you to pin up on your fridge in triumph. The value here is in the doing of it, not the result. And here's what it's going to look like at the end. continuing along, you'll eventually have the whole set done. There are going to be a lot of lines floating around, so keeping them all straight in your head will be a challenge. But you can use some of the strategically placed line weights to help clarify where certain forms overlap. Just make sure that when you add the line weight, you're doing so with a confident stroke using the ghosting method, just as you would when initially drawing the line. Alright, so he's added like a thicker, bolder line to all the front-facing faces, it looks like. I guess that's just to make it a bit prettier. The purpose of the exercise. While serving as a bridge between the previous two exercises, where we have explicit vanishing points presented on the page, and the next one, where you've got no vanishing points whatsoever. Ooh, scary. The rotated boxes exercise is also about learning to infer information about spaces and the arrangement of objects from neighboring objects. Each box has others beside it, below and above. And by the time you're drawing one, some of these others have already been constructed. While their edges don't run perfectly parallel to one another, they do have similar enough trajectories to some of the next box's edges to provide some important information. While we do a lot of educated guesswork, our estimations of convergences and perspective in general are based on a number of more grounded sources. We're still aware of the vanishing points, even if they're not drawn explicitly on the page or even present within the frame. They're still there because we can see all these lines pointing so vehemently towards them. By not being so tightly tethered, however, you're giving a great deal more freedom to play inside of the space, adhering to the spirit of the rules without being bogged down by them. I think this is a critical part of the drawing, and puts you in a much stronger position than someone who's only learned perspective through the laborious plotting of innumerable vanishing points, reference points, measuring points, and so on, and who goes on to draw a dog without understanding how perspective can apply to it. Perspective, form, 3D space. These are all the factors in everything we draw, in some way or another. And so we do need to learn to approach it in a more everyday kind of fashion. Mistake. Not actually rotating. The common mistake I see that students confuse the natural convergences of perspective with rotation. As you can see here, the corresponding edges of these boxes are all converging towards roughly the same vanishing point. By the rules of perspective, this means that they're not rotated relative to one another, because their vanishing points have not moved. This often is seen together with students stretching the boxes into the distance, as though this is the way their brain is fighting against the rotation, in its desire to keep things nice and gridlocked. Oh geez, that's quite a mess. Not keeping things together. Keeping your gaps narrow and consistent is critical to being able to use neighboring forms as efficiently and as possible to infer information about the space. So here the gaps are not narrow enough, and they're guessing way too much. Quite an extreme example of that. Mistake. Not drawing through boxes. Drawing through boxes helps us to understand how those forms sit in 3D space, and how they relate to other forms that are present. That understanding of space is something that develops slowly, and we can work on it by exploring it in this manner. if you do this exercise without drawing through your forms, you're going to end up missing on a great deal. It may look a lot cleaner, but it'll be worth a lot less in terms of what you're actually getting out of it. Yeah, so drawing the whole box. I also feel like drawing the whole box is kind of easier, actually. uh, Example homework. For once, I'm not going to say that this is what your work should look like when it's done, because in all likelihood, it won't. If it doesn't, I don't want you to fuss over it. As long as you've completed it and drawn each and every box and made an attempt to achieve a full range of rotation on each axis, then move on to the next exercise. If you've struggled with this exercise, then I'd recommend that once you complete the rest of lesson 1, you'll move on to the 250 box challenge. This will give you a great deal more practice with freely rotating forms in 3D space and how they can be manipulated. All right, so this is what we're going for at the end. Or at least something similar. I notice he's spacing out the boxes way too much here, though. He's going against his own suggestions. Alright, well, that was all the instructions. Now, we've kind of run out of time. So I'm thinking, because otherwise we're going to be here for the next 1.5 hours, that we'll save the actual exercise for tomorrow, and then that'll just be the lesson. Are you guys fine with that? All right, great. So we'll just hop on to freedraw. It is now reward time. Good job following along. I hope it's a good idea to maybe take a couple of notes, but anyways, I digress. I'll set a timer for 30 minutes. And then we will start drawing. Luxoc asks if we can take like a few days. What do you mean? Just doing this exercise for a few days? Or doing a previous exercise for a few days? I'm pretty sure that these, so you want to make sure that the muscle memory is down. I don't think you're supposed to have the muscle memory down for this exercise, nor any other exercises in this lesson. I'm pretty sure that's why the 250 box challenge exists, which we are gonna do after lesson 1. So no, we're not gonna grind this exercise for a few days. And he also said very clearly that we're only going to do this once, so we aren't going to incorporate this as a daily exercise either. So getting the muscle memory, and don't really worry about that right now. As he said, that's something that comes with time. And, yeah, you're not supposed to be perfect at this yet. Otherwise, we would be at lesson 2, right? As long as you aren't good at it, we'll just stay on the lesson. What does everyone else think then? Should we continue like we have so far, or should we take a couple of days where we grind out the same one? Well, I think people might have already muted me. um, alright. So, with the next exercise, I suppose I'll put a poll up or something for when everyone is done. Or give you however long time you need. That'll be fine. Anyways, sit back, relax, and enjoy the smooth sounds of light, relaxing, uplifting, royalty free music 3 hours. And have fun drawing. close to 30 minutes. Go ahead and upload your stuff. Alright. Let's see what everyone have come up with today. Ooh, Lepia on time, quick. Oh gosh, those are adorable. Oh, that's very pretty. Hi. Nice. Here are some that I drew. There's this guy. And, there's a monk that's like listening to God or something. We have an alien invasion through some floating islands and cliffs and stuff. And the snake with the apple tree in a world that's falling apart. This one turned out particularly cool, I think. Ooh, got some good... Oh, your lines are getting closer than last time, Luxo. Good job. And we have Batty with the... Oh, jeez. I love this. Oh no, Dracula's feasting in the... Oh, this is very cool. He looks like someone from the Addams Family, I feel like. Oh, he's giving a high five to the guy. I really love the perspective in this one. It's really cool. Very imaginative. Ooh, that's a nice tree. Nice roots as well. Have you looked up how to draw trees? Oh, that's very cool. And a little porcupine using the fallen branch as a shelter. How cute. Little woodland creatures. That's very good. I noticed your bark. I drew some bark here. You can probably just copy my technique if you want to. These are very... I find that's just how I find drawing wood works best for me. Ooh, and then this person looks almost like a rogue in a fantasy game. Give him a bit more leathery armor. A little dagger. There you go. Dungeons and Dragons character. Very cool. Alright. Well, that'll be it for today. I'll be sitting in the casual voice chat for about 20 minutes before I start doing some Japanese. Other than that, I wish you have a wonderful day. I hope you have fun, cause I know I did. Bye bye everyone, and thanks for coming today.